So heads up to everybody.
All right. So, I was asked to share information about the Washington Coast Restoration and Resiliency Initiative. And so that's what I'll be doing on this late Friday afternoon. This is a funding program that connects jobs, coastal communities, and natural resources on the Washington coast. And just as a point of introduction, I know I was looking through the participant list. I know some, but not all of you. And so just to introduce myself, my name is Mara Zimmerman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Coast Salmon Partnership. That's the salmon recovery region for the Washington coast. And my contact information is here. I did also want to make you aware that we do have a web page for the WIKRI, or Washington Coast Restoration Resiliency Initiative, where you can learn more and look at specific projects that you might be interested in knowing more about. So the acronym for this program is WIKRI, and I will quickly transition into saying WIKRI instead of the longer mouthful of the full program name here. So this afternoon, I was going to address 4 different topics for you, and then interested in questions you may have about the program and or input that you have on the program, depending on your familiarity with what I am already presenting. And so I'll be talking about what is WIKRI and kind of some of the unique aspects of this funding program. Talk a little bit about some projects that have been supported by WIKRI, and the history of the WIKRI program, and then the project list that we are putting forward for the 21-23 biennium capital budget. So what is WIKRI? And I guess kind of related to this, what do restoration and resilience have to do with each other? Why are those put into the same initiative? Well, WIKRI it's a habitat restoration funding program. And I borrowed the text on the slide directly from our grant manual. WIKRI supports projects of regional importance that do the following. That address the highest priority ecological protection and restoration needs while stimulating economic growth and creating jobs in coastal communities. So it has to do with ecological restoration, and it has to do with jobs. And then it also supports projects that use cost-effective methods to protect and restore ecosystem function, goods, and services. And so it has to do with ecosystem services. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those 3 things: ecological restoration, jobs, and ecosystem services, and how in this grant program they really come together. So with respect to ecological restoration, I don't need to argue too hard with folks in this group that there are the benefits of ecological protection and restoration are substantial to the Washington Coast region. Our region, our way of life is largely dependent on natural resources, and our future depends on being able to have these resources sustained into the future. So WIKRI supports habitat restoration. It's not a species-specific project. I have borrowed salmon photos here largely because those are the ones that I have at my fingertips here. But it has supported projects that are related to amphibian habitat, marine fish, wildlife, prairies, all kinds of coastal habitats that are important to our natural resources. But to make a case for salmon in particular, to focus on salmon, the Washington Coast region has 50% of the non-listed salmon populations in the state, which is great, and it's been it's a good thing that we are able to have that in this region. But experts do estimate that our current numbers are just 10% of what they would have been historically, and this means that with perspective of where we would like to be, there is a long way to go when we talk about salmon. So that's on the ecological restoration front. The other pieces of this program are emphasizing the connection, though, between the ecological restoration and jobs and economic growth. So the need for jobs and economic growth is also a substantial issue for the Washington Coast region. Our region has some of the highest unemployment rates in the state. Restoration jobs, as we talk about WIKRI and we talk about this program and the benefits that it provides, restoration jobs put people to work. Whether it's managing forests, such as we see in the upper left corner of the slide here, whether it's decommissioning roads, such as we see in the lower left corner of the slide, removing invasive plants, replacing culverts and tide gates, removing derelict fishing gear. These are jobs for field workers, for construction workers, for biologists, for engineers, project managers, all of whom have the skills that we need to get things done on the ground in the Washington Coast region. Habitat restoration, when we think of jobs and economics, it's also a long-term investment in economic growth. Sustained runs of salmon, for example, depend on a future with healthy river habitat. So when we're fixing degraded habitats, we're not only supporting the natural resources, but we're also sustaining the people who live and work off the lands, and also the local economies that are fueled by tourism of folks who come to fish, hunt, and enjoy the coastal resources. So there's a nice connection there between the restoring habitat and the economic benefits. The last piece I would offer to you here is that restoration also provides ecosystem services beyond the immediate location of a project. And that is also part of how we talk about and think about projects within the WIKRI program. For example, roads that cut off floodplains from rivers are now flooded by those rivers, as you can see here in this photo. And the solutions that we're looking for will restore both floodplain habitat condition and the transportation infrastructure. So we're talking about multiple benefits from a given project that are restoration focused, but are also serving other functions. At the Coast Summit Partnership, we recently conducted a literature review that looked at the scientific evidence for ecosystem services or the multiple benefits of habitat restoration. Some of the findings I have put in this slide here, and there's a longer report if you are interested, but just to highlight a little bit how these connections are made. Riparian restoration also reduces nutrient runoff from agricultural land. So there's a multiple benefit there to these restoration projects. Floodplain reconnection also reduces the erosion of lands and improves summer stream flows. Again, multiple benefits of these types of projects. Fish barrier culverts also reduce local flood damages to people's property and fields. Again, multiple benefits. And estuary restoration increases the recreational use and enjoyment of these habitats. So when you put these three together, the ecological restoration, the jobs, economic growth, and the ecosystem services, it really represents a holistic description of the benefits of habitat restoration and what the WIKRI program is trying to accomplish, but also to communicate. And so the connections here occur with any habitat restoration project. But the difference is that the applicants in the WIKRI program are asked to specifically justify their proposed restoration work with respect to jobs and with respect to ecosystem services or additional threat reduction functions that their project may serve, recognizing that interconnectedness of the ecological health, the economic health, and the ecosystem function. So you put these three together, and that's the resilience piece. So we think of resilience as the ability to rebound from disturbances, whether they're environmental or economic. It's thinking about how these three things work together that offers resilience of a system, of a community into the future. Certainly not the only thing, but in this case, one answer to that need for resilience. All right. So next, I want to talk a little bit about some of the projects that have been supported by WIKRI to date. It's a relatively new grant program, 2015, was the first year that this biennial grant program occurred. Historically, the Washington coast has really been overlooked for state funding, largely because we lack listed species. And kind of getting back to my original point, that there's a lot of natural resource here that relative to the rest of the state is in fairly good shape. But we know that it needs to be better, and it needs to be better to sustain a way of life. So WIKRI has been a critical source of funding for the Washington coast. This graph on the right here shows just the last 6 years of salmon recovery funding of 2 major grant programs, the Salmon Recovery Funding Board in the blue bars and WIKRI in the orange bars. And you can see where the Salmon Recovery Funding Board has been a consistent grant source over time, and indeed it dates a lot further back than 2015. When the WIKRI program began in 2015, all of a sudden we had the opportunity to tap into a new funding source that to really boost and move some of the habitat restoration work forward. So this next slide is a screen grab from the web page that is a place that you can learn more about WIKRI projects. And there's a map there, and what you're able to do is to click on these individual points on the map and learn more about each individual project and the benefits that it has generated with respect to jobs, with respect to stream miles or upland acres restored. So I wanted to walk you through several of those projects to highlight a bit of the diversity of the types of projects that have been historically supported by the WIKRI program. So bear with me just a moment here. I'm going to go to a web page. So now I'm actually on the WIKRI web page that I was telling you about. And for our first project, I'm going to take you to the mouth of the Quillayute River. Moment. And we'll look at the Quillayute River Thunder Field and Mora Road project. So this is a project that is sponsored by the Quillayute tribe. The purpose of this project is to work on the lower river that has been straightened over time by a changing channel and re-engage a lot of the floodplain habitat so that juvenile salmon have a place to rear. If we look at this project, it over time has, or over the course of this particular phase of the project, created 4.3 full-time equivalent jobs. It did not have a whole lot of habitat work on the ground in this first phase because it was this first phase was really a design portion of the project. So sometimes we get project proposals that are focused more on design, and then they follow up with the actual implementation of the work. But if we want to look a little bit deeper into this project, I click that more information there. This is a snapshot of the project. What I wanted to point out to you was that one of the ways in which this project stands out and has been a good match for the WIKRI program I mentioned that the work is being done in the lower river to reconnect some of that floodplain habitat that has been disconnected from the main stem channel. In doing that, they are also working to protect critical infrastructure at the mouth of the Quillayute River, and to balance that need to restore salmon habitat and protect infrastructure. So you have Thunder Field, which is a location of significance, cultural significance to the Quillayute tribe. You have Mora Road, which is a National Park Service road out to Rialto Beach, which is continually being threatened by erosion from the river. And then you have the village of La Push, which among the many aspects of it is home to the U.S. Coast Guard, or a U.S. Coast Guard station, excuse me. So as this project is developing, it has these multiple benefits and multiple outcomes that are being worked toward. Taking you to down the coast just a little bit, we're gonna stop at the Hoh River and look at the Pulling Together in Restoration project here, which is this project is an invasive plant removal and control project. It is sponsored by the 10,000 Years Institute, which is a nonprofit organization. This project created 21 full-time equivalent jobs. It restored 17 miles of riparian habitat, 14.5 acres of riparian habitat, 19 in-stream miles restored, and 27 miles of upland habitat. So quite a bit of habitat gain coming from this project. We learn a little bit more by clicking on this more information, but I would specifically highlight for you here some of the ways in which this project has really matched well with the WIKRI program. The proponents really argue that early detection of these invasive plant issues are highly cost effective because has made an economic argument for why get in there and address the invasive plant issue early as opposed to wait and have it cost a whole lot more. And so that has been one aspect of this. And another important aspect of this project is that it has created a large number of jobs, and particularly it has to employ youth in Western Clallam County, many of which this is their first job. And so really bringing youth into the workforce and providing them with some experience and work experience that will help them as they go forward in their lives and sort of contributing to that local economy and community, as well as the jobs. I'll take you a little bit further down the coast. There's 4 projects I was going to introduce you here just to kind of give you a sense of the type of work. We'll go to the mouth of the Quillayute River. So this was a project here to remove derelict gear from nearshore habitat and establish a shoreline monitoring project that would help with some of the management of nearshore species. This project was sponsored by the Quinault Indian Nation. It provided 12 full-time equivalent jobs and restored 1,800 acres of nearshore habitat. And just to take a little bit deeper look at this project, as I mentioned, the objective here was to remove the derelict crab and fishing gear from over 150 square miles of nearshore habitat. But there are additional benefits to this that the project proponents were able to describe, including improving habitat for migrating gray and humpback whales, improving fishing conditions for recreational and commercial salmon, Dungeness crab, and other nearshore and nearshore fishes, and then also to establish some permanent coastal monitoring sites that would help with the management of these species going forward. So again, multiple benefits and contribution to the local community that this project provides. And then last, but certainly not least, I'll take you all the way down to the south end of Willapa Bay, and we'll go to Ellsworth Creek Watershed near the Bear River there in southern Willapa Bay. So this is a project that worked on road management in a watershed that has an overall plan of watershed scale restoration and improving the conditions of the entirety of the watershed. This is a place where, for example, there's a very high density of chum salmon spawning, wanting to protect and restore those populations. So this project generated 9 full-time equivalent jobs. It opened 2 stream miles with 2 barriers removed, and these stats are actually just for the anadromous fish habitat. You'll see in a moment that there was a lot more done with respect to barrier removal or culvert removal, excuse me, for this project, and then restored about 10 acres of upland habitat. So if we take a little bit deeper look at this project, and unfortunately we don't have a picture here, but this, I think I did show some earlier pictures and slides of work that's being done in the Ellsworth Creek watershed. This project itself decommissioned a whole series of roads within the Ellsworth Creek watershed. It planted native seed to help regrow the riparian buffer, and it replaced or removed between 50 and 75 non-functioning culverts. So these are not necessarily on fish-bearing streams, but these are culverts that are and roads that are contributing to sediment that if the issue was not addressed, would end up in the stream and would end up creating further degraded salmon habitat. So multiple pieces of this project contributing to an overall watershed restoration plan. This project was also able to use the skills of local contractors skilled in using the equipment to do the road decommissioning, and really relied on the expertise there, and also obviously then providing the employment to move the roads to the hilltops to decommission roads. Again, sort of multiple benefits and jobs created by this project. So that's a little tour. I would only say that if you are sort of curious about some of the other projects that have been sponsored in the past through the WIKRI program, do come to the webpage and take your time to take a deeper look. All right. So the next piece here then is just a little bit about the history of this program, sort of how it got started and where we are today. This is a funding program that is relatively new, and so it is very much in a process of evolution. Were I to describe this program, one thing that I think is important to know is each of these projects has pretty significant local impact, but the program has developed and succeeded because of the region-wide support. And folks recognizing that that the program is about not only individual projects, but also about bringing funds for habitat restoration and for jobs to the Washington Coast region. So this program did originate with local sponsors. And so members of the Marine Resource Council, excuse me, the lead entity groups in the very first year that this program, or the very first year that WIKRI became a funding package through the capital budget, it occurred because local sponsors came together and said, hey, we have projects that could be sponsored here. Those projects will bring jobs to the coast. Let's make a compelling case to our legislators and see see if they'll support us, and they did. Over time, legislators have indicated that they want a vetted and ranked project list, and so there's been continued effort to do this. And so the program has been formalized into a grant program with the Recreation and Conservation Office. It is developed into a competitive grant round. So not all applications now meet the sort of funding threshold that's being requested of the legislature. We actually have quite a bit more need and also quite a bit more capacity to do work than the amount that is being requested of the legislature. And other thing I would add here is that there is a continued emphasis as we grow this program on region-wide support, which means that the input and the feedback as the grant cycle continues to be of great value, as is the outreach phase, where once we have a ranked project list, we do reach out to the project sponsors and to others in the coast region to say, hey, this is a program that will bring benefits to your community. Please talk to your legislators about this and make sure they understand its value. Just a couple words on the competitive grant round for those who are interested here and who may or may not have a whole lot of information on that. This is a 2-year cycle, so we just completed this last grant round in summer of 2020. There is a grant manual with lots of details about schedule and eligibility and criteria. And so there's a fair amount of detail provided with respect to what makes a strong proposal, how will the projects be scored, et cetera. Projects are scored by a technical review panel that are geographically diverse and diverse by discipline. So we try to really balance out the geography and the disciplines that are represented of the folks that are scoring the projects. Scoring criteria really reflect the breadth of focus for this program. First and foremost, the projects are scored based on their restoration benefit, but then also by their community benefits, so jobs, resilient, infrastructure, threat reduction, by their likelihood to succeed, by their cost efficiency. We are using public funds, so that is of particular importance here, and then also by their local supports. We do have a steering committee that was new this year. That steering committee helps with sort of some of the overall guidance, and as the technical review panel may run into issues about the direction of the program or more policy-related questions, that's where the steering committee can step in. So lastly is our project list for the 21-23 biennium. Just a few things to say about that. Our current project list is an ask of $15 million from the capital budget. That includes 17 projects. It estimated that will create about 113 full-time equivalent jobs, and those are estimates that the project sponsors have provided in their applications. This is, I think, the only salmon recovery funding, and then this isn't just salmon, but it's the only restoration funding grant that I'm aware of where we're specifically asking folks to report on the number of jobs that they estimate will be created, and then once you're done with the project, how many did you actually create, which gives us a lot of confidence when we're talking with people about what kind of benefits this program might provide. The projects on this list, it will support the work of conservation districts, regional fish enhancement groups, tribes, land trusts, other nonprofits, and in addition, across the coast region, from north to south. I think some of the questions about this legislative session, I think we all have them, and it's, if we could take our binoculars and kind of see into the future, we would like to know, what to make of the economic uncertainty, what to make of the restrictions due to the COVID pandemic. I would offer a few things to you that I sort of heard from sources that in terms of what things may look like, and some of this again may not be news to you, or it might be something of use, but it is very likely that most, if not all, of the legislative session will be virtual. Among other things, what that sort of changes the access we have to our legislators in terms of you don't have to be in Olympia to have the same access as someone who is in Olympia all the time. And so that may change a bit the dynamics of how we're able to engage with legislators. In terms of the overall size of the capital budget is funded with bond funding, which means that it's a bit more buffered from economic swings because it's not dependent on the sales taxes, for example. Best estimate that I have most recently heard is that we're looking where the capital budget last biennium was $3.4 billion, that we're looking at a reduction to about $3 billion this biennium, but that's very tentative, and again, if we had perfect eyesight looking into the future, I think we would all like to know how we should be how we should be thinking about the session and the funding ahead. That said, the importance of communicating about this program and about the benefits it brings to the coast region and the coast-wide benefits is still an important and valid point. With that, I'm sort of happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback about the presentation.
This is Doug, Mara, and
yeah.
I'm interested in who are the personalities on the steering committee and the technical review committee. Do we know any of them? What are their backgrounds?
Absolutely. So the steering committee is myself. It is Garrett Dalen, Nature Conservancy, Kevin Decker, University of Washington Sea Grant, Des Helsley, Wild Salmon Center, and Alice Rubin, who I guess Recreation Conservation Office. And then the technical review panel, I don't have the list of names, Doug, but there were 11 members. It was organized by my program director, who is Ned Pittman. He was also a member of the technical review panel, and we had foresters and economics and fisheries specialists, and there's sort of defined roles that we were filling within that technical review panel for, you know, the sort of, this is a very wide area of discipline. As I said, it's not just focused on salmon. There've been projects that support all kinds of different ecosystem function, and so trying to get a wide range of technical experts. The other representative on the technical panel, I believe, is on the call right now, is Christy Nevitt. And Christy provided a citizen perspective with respect to, you know, are these good use of public funds? That's a big and important part of the question, and kind of from the perspective of someone who cares and is knowledgeable about the resource, but maybe not, you know, in the throng of the profession, if you will. And so we had that perspective on the review panel as well.
Hey, Maura, this is Key. So, yeah, there were a bunch of us on the, like she said, 11 of us. There were some tribal members on there. Rich Osborne, who is the scientific research person. What is his title, Maura, exactly? For Coast Salmon Partnership?
I think he's a science director at the Olympic Natural Resource Center.
So, and myself was on there, and Rich and I have been on both the WIKRI initial group from the very beginning and on the technical review panel from the very beginning.
Neat.
I guess the other thing I would add, Doug, is that this is not sort of, membership is not written in stone, and in fact, participating on the technical review panel, those folks really worked their rears off. It was a very, they had a lot to do, and we will have to go out and request again their volunteer participation on that panel, and I do expect some amount of turnover, both in terms of new interest and then also folks that say, hey, this is good stuff, but this was a lot of my time.
Yeah. The other thing I would
statistics and whatnot that you might use as you're developing the case. I'd be happy to talk with you about either option, but that would be really fantastic.
Hey, Mara, this is Garrett. Just to build on Doug's idea a little bit, I think that we could work with Brittany, who is my colleague, to craft a letter that MRCs can either sign as a whole or as individuals, but I could see a very distinct letter coming from the MRCs, especially if we think back, I guess it's 6-7 years now, to when WIKRI was kind of formed and molded. That was very much an MRC influence on that as well. So I think a letter speaking to that and then summarizing the impact that it's had. Yeah, Doug, I think that could be pretty powerful. And Brittany's skilled at those sorts of things and could probably do some of the legwork for you to get a nice draft going.
Excellent.
That'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Mara and Doug and Garrett. Mara, I had a quick question. Looks like we're going to be running a little bit into Tom Rudolph's time, but we can always run over into social hours. No big deal, I don't think. Just wanted to point out a topic that came up yesterday during the discussion was that that there's a lot of need for sustained local jobs, right, within restoration and otherwise. And so I was curious with a funding program such as WIKRI, which is soft money that is geared towards supporting local jobs and does, which is amazing. I'm just curious if you could speak towards any examples you have maybe of those jobs turning into longer term or permanent jobs, or how that boosts the capacity of existing jobs that are longer term.
Yeah, so the project, the successes there would be projects that have been supported by WIKRI for multiple grant rounds. So the sustained support of positions is largely dependent on the success of the competition of the projects for the most part. However, now that I'm sort of thinking a little bit more about your question. One of the tribes on the North Coast used the WIKRI funding to initiate a habitat restoration biologist position within the tribe. Over time, now they have someone in place, there are additional funding sources that can support that position. So that's a little bit more of an example where the WIKRI funding has started a position, and then you're able to carry it out into other funding sources going forward. I think the more indirect, the sustained aspect of restoration work, and the argument there may be more in terms of the indirect benefits to jobs. And what I mean by that is, restoring habitat that folks are then going to visit or use or whatnot brings money to the community, which brings the need for people to work in the community, kind of more of the indirect benefits. And those are not super easy to quantify, and certainly we haven't tried to quantify that within this program. But that would be, I think, another way to think about the sustained benefits, much less, not nearly as easy to quantify.
Cool, thanks a lot. Yeah. Are there any other questions for Mara? Can also pick it back up in discussion time too.